Well, that's a solid what the actual fuck from me, Lieutenant Zoe Harrison muttered, peering through the scope of her M110 sniper rifle. The dusty brown hills of the Nevada test range stretched out before her, the targets mere specks in the distance. Behind her stood a 7-foot-tall reptilian alien with silver-blue scales and 4 eyes, all of which were currently giving the human equivalent of an eye roll. "Your projectile weapons are most inefficient," stated Ambassador Klvac of the Galactic Hegemony. His voice carried that special tone reserved for adults explaining simple concepts to particularly dense children. "Our analysis indicates your success rate is approximately 27.3% at this range. Most disappointing." Zoe fought the urge to swing her rifle in his direction. Instead, she took a deep breath of the desert air, the scent of gunpowder and sage filling her nostrils. "With all due respect, Ambassador," she said, not bothering to hide her grin, "you might want to hold your judgment until you understand what you're looking at." The meeting between humanity and the galactic hegemony had gone about as well as could be expected when a vastly technologically superior civilization shows up uninvited in your solar system. There had been the usual posturing, threats, and eventually treaties. Now, 6 months into cultural exchange, Earth's military leaders had finally agreed to demonstrate some of humanity's weapons technology. It wasn't going well. "I understand perfectly," Ambassador Klvac replied, his secondary eyelids blinking in what the human delegation had learned was a sign of dismissal. "Your species has only recently discovered basic metallurgy and rudimentary ballistics. Your weapons fire unguided metal projectiles using chemical propellants. No gravitic assistance, no targeting AI, no plasma containment. It's quaint." Next to Zoe, Major Tomas Okafor of the UN Joint Military Command gave a polite cough that poorly disguised a laugh. "Ambassador," Okafor said, "Lieutenant Harrison is one of our finest marksmen. Perhaps you'd care to observe a full demonstration before rendering judgment?" Klvac's upper arms performed the hegemony gesture of acquiescence, a sort of shrug that somehow managed to look condescending despite the alien physiology. "Proceed," he said. Zoe resisted the urge to flip off the ambassador and instead settled back into position. She adjusted her stance, feeling the familiar weight of the rifle against her shoulder. The wind was picking up, a common afternoon occurrence in the Nevada desert. Her spotter, Corporal Dmitry Volkov, murmured wind speed and direction into her ear. 5 rounds, she announced, then squeezed the trigger. 5 shots rang out in quick succession, the rifle bucking against her shoulder with each one. Through her scope, she could see that none of her shots had hit the central target. Ambassador Klvac made a sound resembling a tea kettle boiling over, the hegemony equivalent of a derisive snort. "As I predicted. 5 shots, 0 successes. Your accuracy is—" "Computer," Okafor interrupted. "Display impacts." The large screen on the observation wall lit up, showing a thermal image of the target area. 5 distinct heat signatures glowed on the display, but none were on the target itself. "As you can see," Okafor continued smoothly, "Lieutenant Harrison's shots struck exactly where they were intended to strike." He gestured to the screen. "The first round hit the rock 3 meters to the left of the target, ricocheted, and struck the supply cache we had hidden behind the ridge. The second round struck the buried communications relay 20 meters behind the target. The third disabled the power generator for the entire compound. The fourth hit the fuel cell of the unmanned drone we had stationed there. And the fifth—" He paused for effect. "The 5th round struck a bullet from a previous firing exercise that had lodged in a tree, causing it to detonate and send fragments into what would be the command tent in a real engagement." For the first time since their arrival on Earth, Ambassador Klvac was speechless. His 4 eyes blinked asynchronously, a sign, the human delegation had learned, of extreme confusion. But none of those were the designated target," he finally managed. Zoe stood, brushing desert dust from her uniform. "That's because, Ambassador, humans have a saying, only amateurs shoot at what they can see." The Hegemony battlecruiser, Indomitable Reason, hung in high orbit above Earth like a silvery dagger. In the ship's main conference chamber, Ambassador Klvac was giving his report to the assembled Hegemony command staff. "And so it appears that the humans have developed an entirely different approach to warfare than anything in our records," he concluded, his voice carrying the faint harmonic that indicated deep concern. Fleet Commander ZX Teal leaned forward, her bony crest flushing a dark purple of skepticism. "You expect us to believe that these primitives, who have barely achieved rudimentary spaceflight, pose any kind of tactical concern?" Klvac activated a hologram showing the firing range demonstration. "With respect, Commander, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood human warfare. Their approach is unpredictable, Unpredictability is merely a sign of desperation, scoffed Subcommander Vernas, his scales rippling with amusement. Any species with proper battlefield simulations optimizes for efficiency. That's just it, Kulvak insisted. The humans don't optimize for efficiency. They optimize for effectiveness. And they have a disturbing tendency to, well, to cheat. Cheat? The word had no direct translation in the hegemony language, and the translator implant struggled with the concept. They deliberately create situations where established rules and expectations don't apply, Kulvak explained. For instance, observe this demonstration they arranged. The hologram shifted to show a different scene. A human military vehicle, what they called a tank, facing a series of barriers and targets. The humans were asked to demonstrate their vehicle's ability to overcome obstacles and engage targets. Kulvak narrated. Watch what happened. In the recording, the tank approached the first obstacle, a deep trench. Instead of attempting to cross it, the tank fired its main gun at a nearby hillside, causing a landslide that filled part of the trench. It then crossed over this improvised bridge. Now observe the target engagement. Kulvak continued. The tank approached a hardened bunker target, but, instead of firing directly at it, launched what the humans called a smoke grenade. Under cover of the smoke, the tank circled behind the bunker and fired at its more vulnerable rear. This is not how our battle doctrines would approach the problem, Kulvak concluded. And when I inquired about this, the human commander merely said, if you find yourself in a fair fight, your planning has failed. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Fleet Commander Zexteel's crest had shifted to the pale blue of contemplation. This is concerning. Our simulations assume rational actors optimizing for known parameters. If the humans are deliberately subverting expected behavior patterns. Precisely, Kulvak said. And there's more. I believe we need to reconsider our entire assessment of human combat capabilities. You're joking, right? Zoe asked, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. They want to what now? Major Okafor's expression remained deadly serious as he slid the tablet across the mess hall table. The hegemony has formally requested a joint training exercise with our forces. Specifically, they've asked for you to help design it. Zoe picked up the tablet, scanning the official request with growing disbelief. The mess hall around them buzzed with the usual lunchtime activity, but she barely noticed it. This has got to be some kind of trap, she muttered. One day they're looking down their scaly noses at our primitive projectile weapons, and the next they want us to train them? No way. Okafor shrugged. The diplomatic corps thinks it's legitimate. Apparently Ambassador Kelvak made quite an impression when he returned to the fleet. Something about unpredictable tactical innovations and asymmetric approach vectors. So, what? They were impressed by the fact that I can make a bullet ricochet? More like they were shocked that we would even try, Okafor replied, stealing a French fry from Zoe's plate. According to our Xenopsych team, the hegemony's entire military doctrine is built around predictability and optimization. Their computers calculate the most efficient way to win a battle, and that's what they do, every time, without variation. Zoe considered this. That's actually kind of terrifying, and also really dumb. It's worked for them so far. They've conquered or assimilated 17 sentient species across 3 galactic sectors. Yeah, but... Zoe gestured with her fork. What happens when they encounter something their computers haven't seen before? They just... blue screen? Okafor smiled. That's exactly what happened when they watched you shoot, Lieutenant. Their brains blue screened, and now they want to know how we do it. Do what? Think for ourselves? Essentially, yes. Okafor's expression grew more serious. The Joint Chiefs see this as an opportunity. If we can get the hegemony to respect our capabilities, maybe even fear them a little, we buy ourselves time. Time we desperately need if we're going to have any chance against their technology. Zoe sighed, pushing away her half-eaten lunch. Fine, but I want it on record that I think this is a terrible idea. And when it inevitably goes sideways, I expect full immunity from court-martial when I have to shoot an alien diplomat. Noted, Okafor said, his lips twitching. Just try not to start an interstellar war before Thursday. I have theater tickets. The joint training facility had been constructed with remarkable speed on an abandoned military base in the Australian outback. The red earth stretched to the horizon, broken only by the occasional scraggly tree and the gleaming silver structures the hegemony had erected. Zoe stood at the entrance to what the aliens had designated Tactical Simulation Zone Alpha, sweating in the midday heat and wondering, not for the first time, how she'd gotten roped into this mess. Lieutenant Harrison, Ambassador Kulvok approached, flanked by two hegemony soldiers whose sleek armor made them look like walking mercury. "We are most appreciative of your agreement to participate." "Happy to help," Zoe lied, forcing a smile, "though I'm still not entirely clear on what you want me to do." "Simple," Kulvok said, gesturing toward the training zone. "We wish to understand your approach to combat problem-solving. We have constructed a series of scenarios based on our understanding of Earth military challenges. We would like you to navigate them while explaining your thought process." Zoe glanced at these scenarios in question. From what she could see, the aliens had created a sort of obstacle course that looked like it had been designed by someone whose only understanding of human warfare came from watching American Ninja Warrior. "And your soldiers will be running the same course?" she asked. "They will observe first, then attempt to implement your methodologies," Kulvok confirmed. "Uh-huh." Zoe exchanged a look with Corporal Volkov, who had been assigned as her assistant for this farce. "And what exactly is the objective here?" "To reach the end point while neutralizing all hostile elements," Kulvok explained as if it were obvious. "Right," Zoe said, unslinging her rifle. "Standard rules of engagement?" Kulvok made the hegemony gesture of affirmation. "The simulation uses non-lethal energy markers. A hit will be registered on your or your opponent's equipment." Zoe nodded, surveying the course again with a more tactical eye. Something wasn't adding up. The obstacles were challenging but straightforward. Walls to climb, trenches to cross, barriers to navigate. The hostile elements appeared to be automated turrets and drone units. But the layout... "When you say, reach the end point, you mean that structure there?" She pointed to a small bunker at the far end of the course. "Correct," Zoe frowned. "And these markers along the way? We need to hit each one?" "They are checkpoints, yes." She studied the course one more time, then turned to Volkov. "Dmitri, what do you think? Direct approach or flanking maneuver?" Volkov squinted at the course. "The turret placement favors a direct approach through the center. They've left the flanks more heavily defended." "Yeah, that's what I thought too." Zoe turned back to Kulvok. "Before we start, just to be clear, the objective is to reach that bunker while hitting all checkpoints and neutralizing hostile elements, correct?" "Correct," Kulvok confirmed. "And the success criteria is?" "Completion of all objectives with minimal damage sustained." Zoe nodded slowly. "Okay, one last question. Are there any rules about how we're allowed to approach the course?" Kulvok seemed confused by the question. "You are to navigate the obstacles as presented." "As presented," Zoe repeated. "But not necessarily in the order presented?" Now Kulvok looked truly perplexed. "I suppose not. The logical progression would be from start to finish." "Right, logical." Zoe grinned. "I think we're ready to begin." Kulvok moved to the observation platform while Zoe and Volkov prepared at the starting line. "What are you thinking, LT?" Volkov asked quietly. "I'm thinking the ambassador is about to get another lesson in human tactics," Zoe replied. "Follow my lead and be ready to move fast." When the starting signal sounded, Zoe did something that clearly shocked the observing aliens. She turned and ran in the opposite direction of the course. "Lieutenant!" Kulvok's voice came over the communication system. "You are proceeding in the incorrect direction!" "No rule against it," Zoe called back, continuing to sprint away from the course. She and Volkov circled wide around the training zone, approaching it from the far side, near the objective bunker. From this angle, they could see what the course designers had intended to be the hard part of the challenge. A series of overlapping fields of fire from the automated turrets that would make a direct approach to the bunker nearly impossible. "Classic kill zone," Volkov observed. "They want us to fight through the entire course just to end up pinned down here." "Exactly," Zoe agreed. "But from this side..." They had positioned themselves behind the turrets, which were designed to target threats coming from the course, not from the supposedly empty terrain behind them. "Take out the 3 on the left," Zoe instructed. "I'll get the ones on the right. On 3. Their rifles cracked in the dry Australian air, and within seconds, all 6 turrets had been neutralized by shots to their vulnerable rear sensors. "Now for the checkpoints," Zoe said, slinging her rifle. "We'll work backwards." They entered the bunker, the supposed final objective, first, then methodically worked their way backward through the course, hitting each checkpoint in reverse order. When they encountered drones or other hostile elements, they neutralized them from unexpected angles, often using the terrain features that had been designed as obstacles to provide them with cover instead. 23 minutes after they had started, Zoe and Volkov strolled across the official starting line, the last checkpoint on their reverse journey. "Simulation complete," announced the automated system. "All objectives achieved. Damage sustained, 0%. On the observation platform, Ambassador Klavak and the hegemony soldiers stood in stunned silence. How? Klavak finally managed. How did you know to approach the course from the rear? Zoe shrugged, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. We didn't. But when I saw the layout, it was pretty obvious that you'd designed it to funnel us into a kill zone at the end. So instead of playing by your implied rules, we changed the game. But that's not how the simulation was designed to be completed. One of the hegemony soldiers protested. Yeah, that's kind of the point, Zoe replied. In real combat, the enemy doesn't give you a neat set of rules to follow. They try to kill you in the most efficient way possible. Your job is to figure out how to complete your mission without dying, and sometimes that means throwing out the conventional approach entirely. The aliens exchanged looks that even across species boundaries were easy to interpret as profound discomfort. I think, Klavak said slowly, we will need to reconsider our training methodologies. 3 days and 17 increasingly complex scenarios later, Zoe was beginning to wonder if the hegemony was capable of learning. Each time she and Volkov, sometimes joined by other human soldiers, encountered a new challenge, they found creative ways to subvert the aliens' expectations, using deliberate failures to create new opportunities, sacrificing efficiency for surprise, or sometimes just doing the opposite of what the scenario designers had clearly intended. And each time, the hegemony observers were shocked, confused, and clearly disturbed. I don't think they're getting it, Volkov said as they sat in the mess tent, picking at what was supposedly spaghetti bolognese, but looked more like worms in bloody mud. Getting what? Zoe asked, giving up on the pasta and reaching for her bread roll instead. The whole concept of tactical improvisation, Volkov explained. It's like they're missing some fundamental cognitive capacity. Every time we do something unexpected, they study it, codify it, and then try to create a rule for it, completely missing the point that the whole advantage is in not following predictable rules. Zoe considered this as she chewed her bread. Maybe that's evolutionary. Their species developed in a different environment. Maybe predictability was an advantage for them. Or maybe it's cultural, suggested Captain Wei, who had joined their table. As one of the few xenopsychologists with military training, Wei had been observing the exercises with professional interest. The hegemony is old. We're talking tens of thousands of years of unified government. After that long under a single system, innovation might become less valuable than conformity. Whatever the reason, Zoe said, it's becoming pretty clear that they're not going to suddenly start thinking like humans. Which begs the question, why are we teaching them our tactics at all? Aren't we just giving away our only advantage? Wei smiled enigmatically. Are we, though? Consider this. What if the very thing that makes human tactics effective against them is something they're fundamentally incapable of replicating? You mean they can study our approaches all day long, but they'll never be able to implement them because their brains just don't work that way? Volkov asked. Exactly, Wei confirmed. And more importantly, what if this whole exercise isn't about them learning our tactics, but about them learning to fear them? Zoe sat back, a slow smile spreading across her face as she caught Wei's meaning. Psychological warfare. We're not training them. We're intimidating them. Bingo, Wei said, tapping the side of her nose. The Joint Chiefs don't expect the hegemony to start fighting like humans. They want the hegemony to start worrying about humans fighting like humans. Is that why they've been recording everything we do? Volkov asked, glancing toward the corner of the mess tent where 2 hegemony technicians were not so subtly monitoring their conversation. I'd bet my next month's pay that those recordings are being studied by their high command right now, Wei confirmed. And I'd bet the month after that they're absolutely losing their scaly minds trying to figure out how to defend against an enemy that doesn't fight according to predictable patterns. Zoe laughed for the first time in days. So when I've been teaching them that humans are tricky, unpredictable bastards who don't fight fair, you've been doing exactly what High Command wants, Wei finished for her, making the biggest, baddest military force in the known galaxy second-guess themselves. Aboard the Indomitable Reason, Fleet Commander ZX Teal was losing her composure, a rare occurrence for a hegemony officer of her rank. This cannot be correct, she insisted, her crest flaring an alarming shade of orange as she reviewed the latest training simulations. Run the predictive models again. Sub-Commander Vernas operated the console with careful precision. I have run the simulations 17 times, Commander. The results are consistent. Using standard hegemony engagement protocols against forces employing human-style tactics results in a 62% failure rate for our forces. Impossible, Zex Teal hissed. These are primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their weapons are crude. Their defenses are practically non-existent. Their technology is inferior, yes, Ambassador Kolvac agreed from his position at the conference table. But their tactical approach creates complications that our systems struggle to accommodate. Explain, demanded Zex Teal. Kolvac activated a holographic display showing one of the training scenarios, a simulated space battle between a hegemony cruiser and a human vessel. In this simulation, we programmed the human ship with the tactical behaviors we've observed. Observe what happens when our cruiser initiates standard engagement protocols. The simulation played out, showing the hegemony cruiser approaching with overwhelming firepower. But instead of attempting to match the cruiser's strength, the human vessel executed a series of seemingly random maneuvers, including deliberately venting its reactor core to create a radiation cloud that disrupted the cruiser's sensors. This behavior makes no tactical sense, Vernas protested. They damaged their own vessel to create a temporary advantage. Yet that temporary advantage allowed them to circle behind our cruiser and attack its propulsion systems, Kolvac pointed out, rendering our superior firepower irrelevant if we cannot bring it to bear. So we adjust our tactics, Zex Teal said dismissively. Protect our rear approaches. We did, Kolvac said grimly. In the next simulation. He advanced the display to show another engagement. This time, the hegemony cruiser maintained full sensor coverage of all approach vectors. Observe what happens now. In this simulation, the human vessel appeared to suffer a catastrophic systems failure, going dark and drifting. When the hegemony cruiser approached to investigate, standard protocol for potential salvage opportunities, the human ship suddenly powered up and launched what appeared to be its own escape pods directly at the cruiser. Suicide attack? Vernas asked, his scales rippling with disgust. No, Kolvac corrected. The pods contained no life forms. They were packed with explosive materials. A trap. Zex Teal's crest had now shifted to the deep red of anger. This is not warfare as we understand it. There is no honor in such tactics, no efficiency. With respect, Commander, Kolvac said carefully. The humans do not appear to value honor or efficiency in combat. They value winning. At any cost? Vernas asked. No, Kolvac replied thoughtfully. Not at any cost. They have moral restrictions. They avoid civilian casualties, for instance, and follow certain rules of engagement. But within those boundaries, they are disturbingly creative. Zex Teal stared at the simulation results for a long moment. What are you suggesting, Ambassador? I suggest that we may need to reconsider our approach to the human species, Kolvac said. Our standard protocols for technological assimilation and cultural integration assume a certain rationality, a predictability, that the humans do not exhibit. Attempting to absorb them into the hegemony may prove more costly than anticipated. A heavy silence fell over the conference room. You are suggesting we abandon the standard assimilation protocol? Vernas finally asked, his voice thick with disbelief. For a single primitive species? I am suggesting, Kolvac replied carefully, that we may wish to consider a more diplomatic approach. Perhaps offer them protectorate status while allowing them to maintain cultural autonomy. Zex Teal's crest slowly shifted to the pale blue of calculation. Your recommendation is noted, Ambassador. I will consult with the High Command. In the meantime, continue the training exercises. I want to understand every aspect of these human tactics. As the conference broke up, Kolvac found himself alone with Vernas in the corridor outside. You truly believe these humans are that dangerous? Vernas asked quietly. Kolvac's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of profound uncertainty. I believe they are unpredictable. And in my experience, unpredictability is often more dangerous than power. You're being reassigned, Major Okafor announced, dropping a folder onto the table in front of Zoe. They were sitting in a secure briefing room at the joint training facility, the Australian sun beating down on the prefab building's roof with enough intensity that the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle. Zoe could feel sweat trickling down her back as she reached for the folder. Please tell me it's somewhere with a decent climate, she said, flipping open the dossier. I've had enough heat stroke to last. She broke off as she saw the assignment details. This can't be right. It's right, Okafor confirmed, taking a seat across from her. You're being assigned as military liaison to the Hegemony diplomatic mission. You ship out to their station in orbit in 3 days. Zoe stared at him in disbelief. I'm a sniper, not a diplomat. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm not exactly the make nice with the aliens type. Which is precisely why you're perfect for the job, Okafor replied, sliding another document across the table. This came directly from the Hegemony High Command. They specifically requested you. The document was a formal diplomatic request, translated into English but still bearing the strange geometric patterns that marked official hegemony communications. They want me to continue training their military personnel, Zoe read aloud, her disbelief growing. In alternative tactical paradigms. What the hell does that mean? It means, Okafor said with a slight smile, that you scared them, Lieutenant. Congratulations. I scared them? How? By showing them that all their technological superiority might not mean squat against an enemy that doesn't fight according to their rulebook. Okafor leaned forward, his expression growing serious. The intelligence boys have been analyzing the hegemony's reaction to our training sessions. Their assessment is that the aliens are genuinely rattled by our approach to warfare. So, what? I'm supposed to go up to their space station and keep rattling them? Essentially, yes. Okafor nodded. The Joint Chiefs see this as an unprecedented opportunity. The hegemony has conquered 17 other species, Lieutenant. 17. And none of them apparently gave the aliens pause the way we have. We need to leverage that advantage. Zoe closed the folder, her mind racing. So this is about buying time, making them hesitate before they decide whether to try and conquer us. It's about more than that, Okafor corrected. It's about changing the nature of our relationship with them. Right now, they see us as primitives who might be useful as a client species. We need them to start seeing us as equals, different, but worthy of respect. And you think my showing them how to shoot around corners is going to accomplish that? I think you showing them that humans are fundamentally unpredictable might make them reconsider their usual approach to species integration. Okafor stood up. The diplomatic team will brief you on the details tomorrow. For now, consider this a heads up, and maybe think about what else you might want to teach our new alien friends about human ingenuity. After Okafor left, Zoe sat alone in the briefing room, staring at the assignment folder. This was insane. She was a soldier, not a cultural ambassador. And yet, there was something undeniably appealing about the idea of continuing to mess with the hegemony's heads. To show them that all their advanced technology and rigid protocols couldn't prepare them for good old-fashioned human creativity. Plus, she'd always wanted to see space. The Hegemony Diplomatic Station was a massive ring-shaped structure in high Earth orbit, a gleaming silver halo against the blue and white backdrop of the planet below. As the shuttle carrying Zoe and the rest of the human delegation approached, she found herself speechless for perhaps the first time in her military career. Quite a sight, isn't it? Remarked Dr. Eliza Novak, the head of the xenobiology team and technically Zoe's superior in the delegation hierarchy. Makes our International Space Station look like a kid's science project. It's big, Zoe managed, which was an understatement. The station had to be at least 1 kilometer in diameter, with various structures protruding from its main ring like spokes on a wheel. According to the specs they shared, it houses about 15,000 personnel, Novak continued. Most of them are hegemony citizens, but there are representatives from at least a dozen other species on board. Other conquered species, you mean? Zoe said quietly. Novak gave her a sharp look. Integrated species is the diplomatic term, Lieutenant. And yes, primarily those. Which is why our mission here is so important. We're trying to avoid joining their ranks, remember? The shuttle docked with surprising smoothness, given the different technologies involved. As the airlock cycled, Zoe adjusted her dress uniform and tried to look like someone who belonged in a diplomatic delegation, rather than someone who was calculating angles of fire out of professional habit. Ambassador Kelvak was waiting for them in the reception area, along with a delegation of hegemony officials and representatives of several other species. Welcome to Orbital Diplomatic Platform 7, Kelvak greeted them, his scales shimmering under the station's lighting. We are most pleased to host the first official Earth delegation to a hegemony facility. The formal introductions proceeded with the careful precision of diplomatic protocol, each member of the human team being presented to their hegemony counterparts. When it came to Zoe's turn, she noticed a distinct change in the alien's demeanor, a tensing of posture, a more careful attention. Lieutenant Harrison, Kelvak said, with what she now recognized as the hegemony equivalent of a smile. Your reputation precedes you. Fleet Commander ZXTL has expressed particular interest in your tactical demonstrations. Zoe nodded politely. I look forward to continuing our educational exchange, Ambassador. After the formalities concluded, the human delegation was shown to their quarters, surprisingly comfortable accommodations that had been modified to suit human physiological needs. Zoe's room was Spartan by civilian standards, but luxurious compared to military barracks. A private bedroom and bathroom, a small sitting area, and even a viewport looking out toward Earth. She had just finished stowing her gear when there was a chime at her door. She opened it to find a hegemony officer standing in the corridor, one she recognized from the training exercises on Earth. "Lieutenant Harrison," the alien said, its translator rendering the words with only a slight metallic overtone. "I am Sub-Commander Vernas, Chief Tactical Officer of this station. If you are not too fatigued from your journey, Fleet Commander Zex Teal requests your presence at a private briefing." Zoe glanced at the time display. The delegation's first official meeting wasn't scheduled until the following morning. "Now?" "If convenient," Vernas confirmed, his posture suggesting that it had better be convenient. "Lead the way," Zoe said, straightening her uniform jacket. They traversed the station's curved corridors, passing members of various species, some humanoid, others decidedly not, who gave the odd pair curious looks. Zoe noted the layout as they walked, automatically cataloging potential defensive positions and escape routes. Old habits. The fleet commander's office was located in what appeared to be a secure section of the station, requiring multiple biometric scans for access. Inside, Zoe found herself in a spacious chamber, with one entire wall consisting of a transparent viewport, looking out into open space. Fleet Commander Zex Teal was standing at this viewport, her back to the door as they entered. She was taller than Klvak, her scales a deeper blue with silver markings that Zoe had learned denoted high rank. "Commander," Vernas announced, "Lieutenant Harrison of Earth." Zex Teal turned, her four eyes focusing on Zoe with unsettling intensity. "Lieutenant, thank you for agreeing to this unscheduled meeting." Zoe gave a small nod. "Of course, Commander. I'm at your disposal." Zex Teal gestured to a seating area designed to accommodate various physiologies. "Please, be comfortable." Zoe took a seat, noting that the chair automatically adjusted to her human proportions. Vernas positioned himself by the door, his posture suggesting he was there as both aid and security. "Lieutenant," Zex Teal began, her crest shifting to a neutral blue. "I have reviewed the recordings of your training sessions with our personnel. I must admit to a certain confusion." "I'd be happy to clarify anything, Commander," Zoe replied, keeping her tone carefully neutral. "Your approach to tactical problems defies our understanding," Zex Teal said bluntly. "Our military doctrine is based on 10,000 years of refinement, optimal solutions derived from countless battles across hundreds of worlds. Yet you, a representative of a species that has not even achieved independent interstellar travel, consistently found ways to overcome scenarios designed by our best tactical minds." Zoe chose her words carefully. "Different perspectives can lead to different solutions, Commander. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Our history is full of examples where we had to overcome superior forces through creativity." "Yes, Ambassador Klvak mentioned this concept." Zex Teal's inner eyelids blinked rapidly. "What troubles me is the implication. If we cannot predict how your species would react in a given scenario, how can we establish stable diplomatic relations?" And there it was, the real reason for this meeting, or not military curiosity, but strategic assessment. "Commander," Zoe said, leaning forward slightly, "predictability isn't a prerequisite for peace. In fact, sometimes a healthy respect for an ally's capabilities, even if you don't fully understand them, can be a stronger foundation than assumed control." "An interesting perspective." Zex Teal's crest shifted slightly toward a purplish hue. "Yet it contradicts the hegemony's experience. Our integrated species function harmoniously precisely because their behaviors are understood and accounted for." "With all due respect, Commander, those species are not allies. They're subjects." Zoe knew she was pushing diplomatic boundaries, but something told her directness would serve better than platitudes here. "Humans aren't interested in being subjects, but we make loyal allies when our autonomy is respected." Zex Teal was silent for a long moment, her four eyes studying Zoe with unnerving focus. "You speak boldly for one in your position, Lieutenant." "I'm a soldier, not a diplomat," Zoe replied. "My job has always been to deal with reality as it is, not as I wish it to be." Unexpectedly, Zex Teal made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "This directness is another trait Ambassador Klvak warned me about." "Very well, Lieutenant. Reality as it is, your species possesses inferior technology but unpredictable tactical innovations that our simulations suggest would make conventional assimilation costly. That's a polite way of saying we'd be more trouble than we're worth." Zoe observed. Perhaps. Settle moved to a console and activated a holographic display showing Earth. Or perhaps you represent a different kind of opportunity. The hegemony has encountered few genuinely novel approaches in recent millennia. Stagnation is a risk for any civilization that achieves dominance. Zoe felt like she was suddenly navigating a minefield without a map. What exactly are you suggesting, Commander? I am suggesting, Lieutenant Harrison, that I have recommended to the High Command that Earth be offered a different arrangement than our standard integration protocol. A partnership, rather than assimilation. Zoe managed to keep her expression neutral, despite her shock. That would be unprecedented, based on what we understand of hegemony history. Indeed. Zextiel's crest now shifted to a shade Zoe hadn't seen before, a shimmering green gold that the briefing materials hadn't covered. Which is why I've arranged for an expanded military exchange program, with you as its centerpiece. Me? You have demonstrated an ability to think in ways our tactical officers cannot. I want you to continue challenging them, and by extension, challenging our assumptions. Zextiel's gaze was unnervingly direct. We have become too comfortable with our superiority, Lieutenant. Too predictable. That is dangerous in a universe that may yet hold surprises for us. The implications were staggering. What had started as a simple demonstration of marksmanship had somehow evolved into a fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with the most powerful known civilization in the galaxy. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that kind of responsibility, Zoe said honestly. You have already proven otherwise, Zextiel replied. The formal proposal will be presented to your diplomatic team tomorrow. I merely wish to inform you personally, as you are, somewhat unexpectedly, the catalyst for this change in approach. After the meeting concluded, Vernas escorted Zoe back toward the human quarters. They walked in silence for several minutes before the hegemony officer spoke. You should know, he said quietly, that what the commander has proposed is without precedent in modern hegemony history. There will be resistance. Zoe glanced at him. From whom? Various factions. Those who see deviation from established protocols as dangerous. Those who believe non-hegemony species must be controlled rather than partnered with. Vernas's scales rippled in what she now recognized as discomfort. You have made a significant impact, Lieutenant Harrison. Not all will welcome it. Are you warning me to watch my back, Sub-Commander? Vernas made the hegemony gesture that approximated a shrug. I am merely providing context. Fleet Commander Zextiel sees potential in your species' unpredictability. Others may see only threat. Great, Zoe muttered. Interstellar politics, just what I signed up for. We have that in common, Lieutenant, Vernas said, with what might have been a touch of humor. I, too, prefer the clarity of tactical problems to the murkiness of political ones. By the time Zoe returned to her quarters, her mind was racing. She had come to this station expecting to continue the training exercises, essentially, to keep the hegemony off balance while Earth's diplomats tried to negotiate terms that wouldn't result in humanity's subjugation. Now it seemed she had accidentally backed into a completely different outcome. She sent a brief, heavily encrypted message to Major Okafor. Situation developing. Hegemony considering partnership rather than assimilation. Details tomorrow. Hope you kept those theater tickets. The next 3 weeks aboard the hegemony station were a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings, formal presentations, and, to Zoe's simultaneous amusement and frustration, more tactical demonstrations. The partnership proposal had been formally presented to the human delegation, causing a mix of cautious optimism and deep skepticism. The terms were still being negotiated, but the core concept remained. Earth would maintain its sovereignty while gaining access to certain hegemony technologies in exchange for military cooperation and the sharing of what the aliens kept referring to as alternative tactical paradigms. In practice, this meant Zoe spent most of her days in the station's vast simulation chambers, running hegemony tactical officers through scenarios designed to challenge their rigid thinking. Today's exercise was particularly entertaining, a simulated urban combat environment where the objective was to extract a high-value target from a heavily defended building. No, Zoe said, halting the simulation for the third time. You're still approaching this like it's a mathematical equation with one correct answer. The hegemony officer, a mid-rank tactical specialist named Travak, made a gesture of frustration. The most efficient approach is clearly to neutralize the defensive positions sequentially, creating a safe corridor for extraction. If they were static defenses, sure, Zoe agreed. But in urban combat against an adaptive enemy, efficiency isn't always effective. Think about what they expect you to do, then do something else. This is contrary to all established doctrine, Trovok protested. That's the point, Zoe said, suppressing a sigh. Reset the simulation. This time, I want you to ignore the main entrance entirely. But the building schematic clearly indicates, forget the schematic. In real urban combat, buildings have sewers, maintenance tunnels, adjacent structures. Use your imagination. Trovok's scales rippled with what Zoe had learned was the hegemony equivalent of indignation, but he reset the simulation. From her observation platform, Zoe watched as the alien officer hesitantly began exploring alternatives to the frontal assault approach. It was like watching someone learn to walk, awkward, halting, but ultimately progress. He's trying, at least, said a familiar voice behind her. Zoe turned to find Ambassador Klvak entering the observation area. Ambassador, I didn't realize you were interested in our training sessions. I find them fascinating, Klvak admitted, particularly the psychological aspects. Do you know that Trovok has requested additional shifts in the simulation chamber, outside his assigned duty hours? Really? Zoe raised an eyebrow. He spends most of our sessions looking like he wants to throw me out an airlock. Indeed. Klvak's secondary eyelids blinked in what she now recognized as amusement. Yet he is developing what you might call an obsession with mastering these human tactics, as are several others among our junior officers. Zoe considered this. Is that a problem? It is. Unprecedented, Klvak replied carefully. The hegemony military structure values consistency and predictability. Officers who display too much individual initiative are not typically promoted. But Fleet Commander ZXTL has recently adjusted the evaluation criteria for the tactical division. Klvak made a gesture that Zoe had learned indicated significant change. Officers who demonstrate adaptive problem-solving capabilities are now being flagged for accelerated advancement. Zoe let out a low whistle. That's a pretty radical shift for a culture as established as yours. Indeed. Klvak seemed about to say more when an alert chimed from his communication device. He checked it, his posture immediately stiffening. It appears our time for theoretical discussions has ended. We have a situation developing. What kind of situation? Zoe asked, instantly alert. A Raxiri raiding vessel has been detected near Neptune. They are not responding to communication attempts. Zoe frowned. Raxiri? I don't think I've heard of them. They are not part of the hegemony, Klvak explained, already moving toward the exit. A nomadic species known for raiding vulnerable settlements and ships. They typically avoid hegemony space, but occasionally test our boundaries. And they've decided to test those boundaries in our solar system? Zoe followed him, her training automatically kicking in. That seems like a hell of a coincidence. Indeed. Klvak's voice had taken on a harmonically darker tone. Fleet Commander Zextiel has called an emergency briefing. You are requested to attend. Me? Why? Klvak's 4 eyes fixed on her with an intensity she hadn't seen before. Because, Lieutenant Harrison, this may be an opportunity to demonstrate whether your tactical innovations work in actual combat, not just simulations. The command center of the Hegemony Station was a marvel of alien technology, with holographic displays showing real-time information from throughout the solar system. Zoe felt distinctly out of place as she followed Klvak into the high-security area, acutely aware of the curious and sometimes hostile looks from the Hegemony staff. Fleet Commander Zextiel stood at the central command platform, surrounded by her senior officers. She acknowledged Zoe's arrival with a brief nod before returning her attention to the main display, which showed a strange, angular vessel moving through the outer solar system. The Raxiri Raider entered the system approximately 7 hours ago, Zextiel was explaining as they approached. It has ignored all communication attempts and is on a trajectory that will bring it into Earth's orbital space within 18 hours. A single raiding vessel? One of the officers questioned. The Raxiri typically operate in packs. Our long-range sensors detect no additional vessels, Zextiel confirmed, which is unusual enough to warrant caution. Could it be a scout? Another officer suggested. Testing our response before a larger force arrives? Possible, Zextiel conceded. Though it would be a suicide mission. One raider against a hegemony battlecruiser has no chance of success or escape. Zoe studied the holographic representation of the alien ship. Something about the situation didn't feel right. What exactly are the Raxiri known for? What kinds of targets do they typically hit? Vernas, who was manning one of the tactical stations, answered. They are scavengers and opportunists. They target isolated outposts, damaged vessels, or primitive colonies that lack significant defenses. They steal resources, technology, and occasionally take captives for slave labor. And they know the hegemony is here? Zoe asked. They must realize Earth is under your protection now. The Raxiri are well informed about hegemony movements, Zeketstiel confirmed. Our presence here is not a secret. Then why would they come at all? Zoe pressed. You said it yourself. One raider against a battlecruiser is suicide. The Raxiri may be aggressive, but are they stupid? The question hung in the air for a moment, causing several of the hegemony officers to exchange looks. You believe there is some deception at work, Zeketstiel said. It wasn't a question. I think if I were going to raid a protected system, I wouldn't announce my presence by flying straight in, Zoe replied. I'd try to disguise my approach or create a distraction. Zeketstiel's crest shifted to the pale blue of calculation. Elaborate. Zoe moved closer to the holographic display, gesturing to the raider's trajectory. This approach is too direct, too obvious. It's practically screaming, look at me. What if that's the point? What if they want you to focus your attention on this ship while something else happens elsewhere? Our sensor coverage of the system is comprehensive, Vernas objected. We would detect any other vessels. Maybe, Zoe acknowledged. Or maybe they found a way to trick your sensors. Or maybe the real threat isn't another ship at all. Zeketstiel studied her for a long moment, then turned to her officers. Reassign sensor resources. I want detailed scans of the raider vessel and complete coverage of all approach vectors to Earth, focusing on non-standard trajectories. Commander, one of the senior officers protested. This is a standard Raxiri probe. Protocol dictates. Protocol assumes predictable adversaries. Zeketstiel cut him off. Lieutenant Harrison has reminded us that assumption can be dangerous. Execute my orders. The command center burst into activity as officers redistributed sensor assets and began more comprehensive scans. Zoe found herself in the unfamiliar position of being both an outsider and suddenly influential in an alien military operation. Your perspective is valued, Lieutenant, Zeketstiel said quietly, moving to stand beside her. What else would you consider in this situation? Zoe thought carefully. If I were planning an operation against a superior force, I'd try to use their strengths against them. The hegemony relies on advanced technology and established protocols. I'd look for ways to disrupt both. Such as? Electronic warfare, perhaps. Sensor spoofing. Or... Zoe paused as a new thought struck her. What if the raider isn't the threat at all? What if it's just a delivery system? Zeketstiel's crest rippled with interest. Explain. Maybe the ship itself is just a shell. The real threat could be something it's carrying. A computer virus, some kind of infiltration system, or... She was interrupted by an urgent call from one of the sensor stations. Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the Raxiri vessel. It appears to be launching something. The holographic display zoomed in on the raider, showing small objects being ejected from its hull, dozens of them, spreading out in different directions. Weapon platforms? Someone suggested. No, Vranas reported, analyzing the data. Too small. Each object is approximately the size of a personal transport pod. Realization dawned on Zoe. They're not attacking the station or the battlecruiser. They're going for Earth directly. Explain, Zeketstiel demanded. Those aren't weapons. They're transport pods for raiding parties, Zoe said, the pieces falling into place. They're using the ship as a distraction while they send teams to hit multiple targets on Earth simultaneously. Small groups, probably aiming for quick smash-and-grab operations before you can respond. Zeketstiel's crest flared with alarm. Verify, she ordered. Vernas worked his console rapidly. Trajectory analysis confirms. The objects are on course for various locations on Earth's surface. Estimated time to atmospheric entry, 17 minutes. We can intercept them with the battlecruiser's weapons, another officer suggested. Negative, Zeketstiel replied. At that range, near Earth's atmosphere, there's too much risk of debris causing damage to the planet. We need a more precise approach. She turned to Zoe. Lieutenant, if you were defending against such an attack, how would you proceed? Zoe didn't hesitate. I'd deploy rapid response teams to the projected landing sites. Use local forces when possible since they'll get there faster. And I'd try to hack or disable the transport pods before they land, if your technology can manage that. Zeketstiel made a quick decision. Varnas, coordinate with Earth's defense forces. Provide them with landing zone projections and all available data on Raxiri combat capabilities. Deploy our tactical teams in support roles. She turned to another officer. Attempt signal disruption on the transport pods. If we cannot destroy them safely, perhaps we can divert them to unpopulated areas. As the command center erupted into coordinated activity, Zoe found herself pulled into the tactical planning. Despite her junior rank, the hegemony officers were deferring to her input on how to counter the unconventional attack. A surreal experience that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. You anticipated this, Zexistil said to her during a brief lull in the activity. How? Zoe shrugged. I just asked myself what I would do if I were facing an overwhelming force. You don't challenge strength head-on. You look for gaps, for vulnerabilities. The Raxiri did exactly what humans might have done in their position. Their strategy resembles your tactical demonstrations, Zextel observed. Misdirection, unpredictability, asymmetric approach. The universe has a sense of humor, I guess, Zoe replied. We spend weeks teaching your people to think like humans, and the first real threat uses the same playbook against us. Zextel's crest shifted to a color Zoe hadn't seen before, a deep, vibrant azure. Perhaps that is why the High Command was wise to accept my recommendation for partnership rather than assimilation. Your species understands this type of thinking inherently. Before Zoe could respond, Vernas called out. First pods entering Earth's atmosphere, tracking multiple targets across North America, Asia, and Europe. The next hour was controlled chaos as the combined human and hegemony forces scrambled to respond to the Raxiri raids. The alien raiders had indeed targeted multiple locations on Earth, mostly research facilities, military installations, and technology centers. But thanks to the early warning and coordinated response, many of the raids were thwarted before they could cause significant damage. In the command center, Zoe worked alongside the hegemony tactical team, adapting strategies on the fly as the situation evolved. When 3 pods landed near a research facility in Colorado, she suggested deploying a small force to engage the raiders, while using the facility's own security systems as a trap, a strategy that resulted in the capture of an entire Raxiri team without casualties on either side. The main raider vessel is attempting to leave the system, reported one of the sensor officers. Shall we pursue? Zextel looked to Zoe. Lieutenant, your assessment? Zoe considered the situation. They've committed to their operation. The teams on the ground are their priority now. I'd say let the ship go, but track it if possible. We might want to know where it reports back to. Agreed, Zextil said. Maintain sensor lock on the vessel, but do not intercept. Focus our resources on containing the ground situation. By the time the crisis was resolved, 17 Raxiri raiders had been captured. 5 had been killed in firefights with Earth's military forces, and the rest had managed to escape via emergency transport systems. The damage to Earth installations was minimal, and there had been no civilian casualties, a result that Zextil described as unprecedented for a Raxiri raid. In the aftermath, as the command center returned to normal operations, Zextil called Zoe aside. Your tactical insights were invaluable today, the fleet commander said. You saw a pattern that our standard protocols would have missed until it was too late. Just applying the same principles I've been trying to teach your officers, Zoe replied. Indeed. Zextil's crest had settled into a calm, deliberate blue. And you have demonstrated their effectiveness in actual combat, not merely simulations. This will significantly strengthen the case for our partnership arrangement with Earth. Zoe nodded, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the long, tense day. So what happens now? Now, Zextil said, we formalize the military exchange program. Your defensive tactics clearly complement our technological capabilities. Together, they present a formidable combination. One that the Raxiri and others would be wise to avoid testing again. So, we're partners? Zoe asked, still finding the concept hard to believe. It would appear so, Zextel confirmed. The High Command has approved the preliminary arrangement, pending final diplomatic details. Earth will retain its sovereignty while gaining access to certain technologies, in exchange for tactical expertise and cooperation on mutual defense. All because I showed Ambassador Klavok that humans don't always aim at the obvious target, Zoe mused. Sometimes, Zextil said, with what might have been the hegemony equivalent of a smile. The most important discoveries are made by accident. The hegemony has dominated this sector for millennia because of our technology and our discipline. But perhaps we have become too predictable, too rigid. A little chaos can be healthy, Zoe suggested. Indeed. Zextil made a gesture that Zoe had learned indicated formal recognition. Lieutenant Harrison, the hegemony would like to offer you a permanent position as liaison and tactical advisor to our fleet. You would divide your time between Earth and our facilities, helping to develop what we are now calling integrated asymmetric response protocols. Zoe blinked in surprise. That's quite an offer. I'd need to consult with my superiors. Of course. But consider this. You have already changed the course of hegemony policy toward your planet. Imagine what else might be possible with continued cooperation. As Zoe left the command center, she found Ambassador Klavac waiting in the corridor outside. I understand congratulations are in order, he said. Not only did you help thwart the Raxiri attack, but you've been offered a prestigious position. Word travels fast, Zoe remarked. The hegemony communication network is quite efficient, Klavac replied, though I suspect human gossip travels nearly as quickly. Zoe laughed. Probably faster, actually. We're pretty good at informal information sharing. Another human trait worth studying, Klavac said, falling into step beside her as they walked through the station's corridors. You know, Lieutenant, when I first observed your demonstration at the firing range, I thought I was witnessing an amusing curiosity. A primitive species finding clever workarounds for their technological limitations. And now? Now I understand I was witnessing something far more significant. A fundamentally different way of approaching problems. Klavac's secondary eyelids blinked in what she now recognized as thoughtful consideration. The hegemony has existed for 20,000 years, Lieutenant. In that time, we have encountered hundreds of species, assimilated 17, and cataloged countless approaches to technology, governance, and warfare. But none quite like humanity's. Your species doesn't just solve problems differently, you define them differently. Klavac made a gesture she hadn't seen before, something like a salute. It seems the universe still has surprises to offer, even for a civilization as old as ours. As they reached the human delegation's quarters, Klavac paused. Will you accept the position? Zoe considered the question. 3 months ago, she had been a sniper on a dusty range in Nevada, annoyed at having to babysit alien diplomats. Now she was being offered a role that could shape relations between Earth and the most powerful known civilization in the galaxy. You know, she said finally, I think I might. Someone needs to keep reminding the hegemony that not everyone aims for the obvious target. Indeed, Klavac agreed. And perhaps that is precisely what we need. Someone who sees beyond the target to possibilities we have not considered. As the ambassador departed, Zoe stood for a moment looking out a viewport at the blue-green sphere of Earth below. Humanity had just narrowly avoided becoming the 18th species assimilated by the hegemony, not through superior technology or firepower, but through unpredictability, through the very chaos and creativity that made humans, well, human. She couldn't help but smile at the irony. All those fancy alien weapons, all that advanced technology, and in the end, what had saved humanity was the simple fact that sometimes, the best shot isn't the one aimed directly at the target. Sometimes the best shot is the one no one sees coming.